Hello, I'm author Bob Pierce, and welcome to the studio again. And today we're going to take a moment to take a step back and kind of catch up on a few things. Basically ask, how's it going? We've been watching these videos now for a little bit. I know they're not Hollywood quality videos, but I certainly hope the information that's been included in them has been helpful and you've been making some progress on your project. And well, we just want to kind of cover a few things today that have come to mind as I've been going along working on my own project. Now, while I've been working on making these videos this summer, I've also been working on the next book project. It'll be number 13, I believe. It's a murder mystery set in Russia. And in the process, I've been doing it the way I've been talking about, using my usual process. But some specific things have come up while I've been working on it that, there's some tips I think I'd like to include. So we're going to do that today as well. Now, one of the things, like I said, it's set in Russia, this new book, and one of the things about it is context. And I showed you a little tour in one of the previous videos of St. Albans, Vermont, where a lot of my books, particularly Lilith, were set. And I came to know that town intimately by spending a lot of time there and spending a lot of effort just being observant, walking around town, going into the shops, eating in the restaurants, etc., etc. But I've never been to Russia. And I was reminded of what's now an old movie, The Red Violin, which ostensibly stars Samuel L. Jackson. And in the movie, no relating to his character at all, but there is a character that's in a short segment who's a writer. And she's married to this virtuoso violin player, and they've got gobs of money and live in England. And we see her working at her craft, handwriting as they would have back in the 1800s. And at one point, she announces to him that her main character has run off to Russia. Well, she's never been to Russia, so she doesn't know how to write about Russia. She needs to go there to be able to spend a little time to absorb the culture, the art, the people, the lifestyle, just basically life in Russia. And I got to thinking, yeah, that's a great idea. Well, I don't have that kind of capital. I can't jump on a plane and take the next Aeroflot to St. Petersburg or wherever. I got to rely on something else entirely. Well, my wife, she's Russian descent. Her parents and grandparents came over from Russia. She subscribes to a magazine called Russian Life. It's something I keep renewing for Christmas every year, along with their amazing calendars with photography from all over Russia. And that's basically what the magazine is about. It's about life in Russia, about the people, about the art, about their culture. Just a little bit about the politics, but just enough to show how they affect the people in their day-to-day lives. And it's been a treasure trove of information. Some of my previous books include little segments that take place in Russia, and a lot of the information that I've gleaned from this magazine has been useful in writing those. But this new book is almost entirely taking place in Russia, so this magazine is crucial to my better understanding. Now, I've got books and I've got things on the language, and of course we see stories about Russia, good and bad, mostly bad, in the media. And there have been countless movies like submarines and all kinds of other stuff like that. Yeah, a lot of that is either spun for political reasons or Hollywood making things look the way Hollywood wants them to look. This gives me a real, genuine look at what living in Russia is really like. So that's been a huge help. Another tip I wanted to pass along, you might be familiar with it. It's on PBS. It's called The Antiques Roadshow. It's been on the air for a couple of decades now, I believe. Essentially what they do is they go to various cities and they set up their roadshow. They have a whole bunch of tables and things and different categories, and people bring their antiques and get them appraised. But the really cool thing is, well, they'll highlight some of them, and the appraiser will sit down with the owner of the object and explain the history of it, who made it, where it came from, a few of the little nuanceical bits and pieces of it, which just, again, I was reminded of this when I was watching a rerun of it recently. It is summer rerun season, of course. Every item, everything has a story to it. And now in their cases, they know the stories, or they know much of the stories. But in our case, being fiction writers, we make up the stories. So you go to an antique shop, or you go to a flea market or something, you pick up some object, and you could just imagine the story that might be behind it. It doesn't matter if it's the real story. You're a fiction writer, so it probably isn't real anyway. But if it fits your story, if it fits in your plot, use it. Buy that item, whatever it is, if it doesn't break the bank on you. And maybe you can even photograph it as a prop for an illustration in your book. We'll talk about that sort of thing in yet another video coming up. Another great teacher for inspiration and just basically filling the bank full of information that you can rely on as you write is experiencing things, taking advantage of various opportunities. There's a place up the street here where they repair helicopters and they give helicopter rides. I haven't as yet taken one of their rides, but I have been on a helicopter in the past, so I have some sort of a context. And but if that's something that you want to experience for one of your books, or just to bank, to put in your memory bank, snap a few pictures so you have something to refer to later, take advantage of it. Now, in the book Lilith, Lilith is, of course, an assassin. And she's telling her story to Jack Walsh, the writer, who's writing her biography. And so she's relating various stories of some of her escapades and talks about some of these assassinations that she's done. She's trying not to be too gruesome in her descriptions, but some of the nuances still come through. And one of the things that made me think about it is how hard is it to do that? Now, in one of the stories that she tells, she takes a shot from a rooftop and hits the victim, who's nearly a half a mile away. And I got to thinking, well, how hard is that? So I read up on it, as far as what professional snipers, military snipers and stuff, what they do and how they handle themselves when they're out there. And I thought, okay, the shooting range where I go to punch holes in targets and paper, like a tourist, does have a long range segment. They have different length segments, and it's 100 yards. 100 yards is the length of a football field. And I wanted to see how hard is it to hit a quarter at that distance. And I'll tell you, it is hard. Now, there are a lot of factors you have to keep in mind. As far as the physics of it all is concerned, the friction of the bullet going through the air, much akin to a space capsule re-entering the atmosphere, the air pushing against it as it comes down. bullet drop, they call it, basically the effect of gravity. A bullet doesn't travel in a straight line, it travels in an arc, and it leaves the end of the barrel with all the energy behind it, and the energy, like a rocket launching a space capsule, the energy runs out. That's why rockets have multiple stages. They have to keep that energy refreshed to keep it going. For a bullet, the energy runs out after a little while and gravity takes over and down it goes. So you have to, if you want to hit something the size of a quarter, you have to figure, okay, that bullet has to go up and come down and hit right there where the quarter is. Then there's the human factor. Oh, and crosswinds. Yes, that's another thing. The wind. You think that, a bullet has enough power and energy behind it not to be affected by the wind, but it is. And as the length of the distance gets longer, it becomes more pronounced. And so at the length of a football field, that becomes a real issue. In the book, we see Lilith tying pieces of yarn to tree branches and things like that somewhere near where her target's expected to be, maybe days later, but she can see through the swirling winds between the buildings in the city which way the winds are blowing and how strong they are, and make adjustments to her sights to compensate for that. That's something I read about in another one of these stories. And then there's the human factor. Now you got to be steady to be able to do this. You can't jerk the trigger. You have to breathe well. There's a certain element of breath control in this sort of thing. Muscle control. You have to gently and firmly pull that trigger. Don't yank it. Don't do anything like that, because that will affect the whole gun. And you have to have a steady, solid base to rest the gun on to keep it in line. All of these factors come into the equation, and I figured I would go to the range, bring a quarter or a few of them, because I'm probably not going to be successful anyway, but just tape them to some targets and invest. There's 20 bullets in a box, and I'll invest a box and see how hard it really is. And yeah, it's really hard. So the new book project, it's a real murder mystery story, and it's set in Russia, of all places. And I was inspired to go in this new direction after having seen a movie called Agatha and the Truth of Murder. It's a British film. It's a little obscure. I don't think it was ever in local theaters, not that I recall anyway. But if you can find it, we found it at Walmart. Grab it, because, well, if you're an Agatha Christie fan, you're going to love the movie. If you're a writer, you're going to be inspired by what happens in it, how she breaks out of a writing slump at the early part of her career. And it really kind of gave me the impression, and I was kind of toying with the idea already, of doing a murder mystery. And I have some detective characters that I've used in previous books, and I thought, okay, it's time for them to take the front of the stage and run with the story as leads. So, off to work I go. I started out by doing an outline, as I talked about in earlier videos, doing my so-called roadmap, which ended up being several pages long, which is pretty unusual for me. I don't usually write quite that much. And I also made up my list of characters, which also is about 2 pages long, and started to add the post-it notes to my computer monitor, which has already started to proliferate, although there's still room. Before too long, though, it'll be completely rimmed with yellow post-it notes. I bought a whole new pack just to make sure I had enough, and it happens to be yellow, so we're running out of the green ones. So the yellow ones will eventually supplant them altogether. Now, even though I've been working on these videos for the past few months, I have been going on with this book, getting this first draft written. And that's all part of being dedicated to your craft. Regardless of how much time I've had to invest in doing these videos, and other things too during the summer here, I've made sure that I maintained that dedicated time to keep coming back here to write each and every time, and snatch a few extra little hours here or there wherever I was able to. First draft, writing bloody, as I've talked about in the past, and do want to encourage you to do likewise. I was talking to my cardiologist yesterday. I had an appointment and saw the nurse practitioner. I think that's the right title, but anyway, she told me that she's been working on a book and she can't seem to get past the first chapter. I'm thinking, how many times have I heard that? And I told her about this video series, and I told her, please, God. I wrote down the web address. I didn't have any cards with me. I never have cards with me, but I wrote down the web address for her, and hopefully she'll find it. I'll send her the link once these get posted just to make sure, because she's really kind of frustrated, and I've seen that so many times. So that's the key, writing bloody. Just keep writing, get that book done. Remember, you're working on the whole project. It's a book, not a chapter. So you're not going to keep hammering away at the same chapter to get it right and then move on to the next chapter, because, as we said before, that's what you do. You'll never get the project done. So as I started to write this book, I had a really good idea about the storyline, the plot, and I had a great beginning, and started working on it, and started thinking after a little while, you know, I've got the beginning all figured out. I've got the ending all figured out. The stuff in the middle, but just keep writing. I mean, that's the key to writing bloody. Just keep going. And ideas will come along, inspirations will come along, and you'll eventually start finding ways to adjust and rewrite and rearrange things. Well, what so happened, of course, this is, well, at this point, is getting to be the end of summertime, but during the summer, it's rerun season on TV, and so I caught a couple of rerun episodes of 48 Hours. It's one of these live real life crime drama kind of shows, and it just so happened that the two episodes I caught were murder stories, and in both cases they were cold cases where the police just couldn't figure out what was going on at the beginning, or their clues led them in wrong directions and so forth, and not until sometime later, when a new clue of some sort, or some witness or something came forward who hadn't at the beginning, did they have what they needed to finally wrap up the case and arrest the perpetrator or whatever, to finish out the case. And that gave me a whole new idea. The ending of this book is completely changed now. Now, I'm only up to the 10th chapter, which I'm guessing is a quarter to a third of the way into the book. But I've changed the ending, but I'm not changing the wrong direction that I'm going in. What I'm doing, though, is dropping in hints as to what the right direction is in amongst all of the clues that the detectives are following. And so this completely changed the arc of the story, but didn't really change the overall direction. It will eventually spread out and then turn in the right direction. That won't happen until the very end, though, because as most of my readers know, I love surprise endings, and I love to lead my readers down the primrose path before we get to it. Although, unlike a lot of mystery writers, I'm going to give all the clues along the way, and I want people to get to the end of the book and say, oh yeah, I remember when I read about that here, or read about it there at the beginning of the book. And yeah, now all the puzzle pieces are fitting together at the end. So that's the plan. And so we keep writing, and we keep writing bloody, and we keep dedicated to the time that I have for this project. Each and every day that I have planned to write, stay devoted to that as we go along. Now, in addition to doing the writing of this new book, I've been working on some of the illustrations. This isn't usually the point in the process where I do that, but I wanted to be able to illustrate some of the processes of doing the cover and the illustrations inside, doing props for photographs and that sort of thing. So I've done some of that already so that I could use them in the videos, but they'll be there for whenever I do get to it in the normal process of things. You've heard me talk about my walkabout break. It's a period usually between the third and fourth, or fourth and fifth draft, where I've got a pretty good solid foundation on the writing, and I can step away from it for a little while. So I'll come back to it with a fresh mind and a clear head, and be able to pick up where I left off without being bogged down with a lot of the thought processes that have been plaguing me for several drafts. And during that period is when I usually put the cover together, work on illustrations, build props for photos, shoot the photos, and start getting the visual part of the project done. That's important. No matter how good you are a writer and how amazing your story is, you're still selling a product. And it has to look good, and it has to have a sense of value. And the image on the cover, we'll talk about in other videos about the psychology of using faces for your covers and other things that will attract people's attention to look at your book. But when they have it in their hands, it wants to have a sense of some sort of value. So when they flip through the pages, it has to be composed neatly, it has to look good, it has to be easy to read. The illustrations help to reinforce the story here and there, and in some cases just be decorative, but all contributing to the value of the project. So that's something we'll talk about in other videos, but that's usually what I work on during the walkabout break, which could be a couple of months long sometimes, sometimes just a few weeks, but in either case, it's a time to clear the mind, to kind of redirect the brain a little bit, absorb a little bit of inspiration from the world around you, and then get back to it on the next draft and keep going from there. So that's kind of where we're at right now. I just wanted to share that to kind of encourage you, presuming you've made it this far through all of these videos. You are serious about this craft of yours, and I'm hoping that these have been a big help. So a little encouragement to keep plugging away and get that first draft in the can. So hopefully that has been a little more help and a little more encouragement. Keep writing. I can't stress that enough. Write bloody. If you're still in the first chapter, even the second chapter to a certain degree, keep at it. Don't be obsessed with getting it perfect right out of the gate. Just keep going. And we've got more videos coming that'll talk more about the look of your finished product, about the book's illustrations, the covers, and all of that, how to get images, where to get them legally. That's important. You don't want people to violate your copyright, so you don't want to mess with somebody else's either. And oh, by the way, although it's really, 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 really hard to hit a quarter at the length of a football field, it's not impossible. Yeah, I don't know if you can see that. A plugged quarter. Yes, I'm keeping that. I've got to frame that. It may never happen again. Well, anyway, again, hope your project's coming along well, and we'll keep plugging away on the project that I'm working on here now as well, and maybe we'll do a little catch-up at the end of these videos once again and see how things are going. A little encouragement. I don't know, I'm rooting for you. I really am. I mean, that's why I'm doing these videos. I want you to succeed at this. That's why we're not charging for them. That's why we did the seminars that we did a few years ago. We want to give you the tools you need to get your book written and get it published. So we'll talk more about all of that part of it too, the publishing part of it, at the very end, because that, of course, is the end of the process as well. So until next time, I'm Bob Pierce from the studio.